Coming up on Network Africa. Burkina Faso Junta gives 3 French diplomats 48 hours to leave the country, accusing them of subversive activities. Central African Republic and France holds talks in an effort to revive strained ties. Plus, UNDRC Rights Chief Volker Turk visits, appeals for more attention on Eastern DRC. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Joke Rogers in Lagos. We begin in Burkina Faso, where the government has expelled 3 French diplomats for engaging in what they call subversive activities. The Burkinabe Foreign Affairs Ministry said this in a notice to France, but did not reveal the nature of the activities. The diplomats, who include 2 political advisors at the French embassy in Ouagadougou, have been asked to leave the territory of Burkina Faso within the next 48 hours. Relations between Burkina Faso and its former colonial power, France, have soured since Captain Ibrahim Traoré seized power in a coup in September 2022. The junta leader has pivoted Burkina Faso towards Russia, ending its close ties with the former colonial power, France. Under his rule, several French diplomats have been expelled and France's military base in the country shut down. Meanwhile, the Central African Republic and France have agreed on a roadmap to boost bilateral cooperation as both countries strive to revive strained ties. This follows a meeting in Paris on Wednesday between the CAR president and French President Emmanuel Macron. President Touadéra's visit to France, the second in over 6 months, signals growing efforts by both countries to smoothen relations, which were strained after the CAR government started heavily depending on military and political support from Russia. According to a joint statement from both countries, the roadmap of the cooperation aims to establish the framework of a constructive partnership that respects the sovereignty of the state. Over in the Democratic Republic of Congo, the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Volker Turk, is currently on an official visit to discuss human rights and to voice support for the country and its people. Speaking on his first full day in the DRC, he highlights how the country is one of the richest in natural resources, but these riches have brought little benefit to the population as a whole because of violence and conflicts. Mr. Turk's mission continues, and he is due to meet with President Felix Tshisekedi and senior members of the government, also in Kinshasa. He will meet civil society representatives, the National Human Rights Commission, members of political parties, and the diplomatic community.
With a group of people who had been displaced as a result of horrible violence. Massacres were committed in their homes, and they have been here for the last 4 years. Their most fervent wish is to be able to go back.
In the meantime, Mr. Turk also visited a camp for internally displaced people near Goma in North Kivu. In recent months, the security and human rights situation has significantly deteriorated in North Kivu province, resulting in hundreds of thousands of people fleeing attacks by armed groups. The number of displaced in North Kivu is 2.67 million out of the 7.2 million overall in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Some of those fleeing violence have sought refuge in and around Goma.
I was here 2013. I'm back here today, and I've talked to people who tell me stories of horror, of what happened to them in their home areas, why they had to leave because of massacres, because of violence, because of rape, because of terrible things that happened to them. They end up here again. Some of them have been displaced many times. Some of them don't know what their future is. They don't know what their future holds. And it is so absolutely critical that the mother of all rights, the right to peace, is finally realized for the people around me. What breaks my heart is to see a population exhausted by violence, exhausted by conflict, exhausted by the horrors of their daily lives. They need to have a future, they need to see a future, and we all need to work towards that, because that's what they most fervently hope for.
Elsewhere, 4 former senior Malawi officials have been banned from entering the U.S. over corruption allegations. They include former police chief George Kainja, former head of the Malawi Anti-Corruption Bureau, Roinek Matemba, former director of public procurement and disposal of assets, John Suzibanda, and former police service attorney, Wabi Kaluba. The 4 have been designated by the State Department as generally ineligible to entering to the United States due to their involvement in significant corruption. The ban also extends to the spouses of the ex-officials. The statement adds the banned officials abused their public positions by accepting bribes and other articles of value from a private business person in exchange for awarding a government procurement contract for the Malawi Police Service. The former officials are also facing charges in Malawi after they were named on a list of more than 80 prominent Malawians accused by the anti-graft body of having corrupt dealings with a British businessman, Zunith Sattar. All 4 and Mr. Sattar deny any wrongdoing. The first Russian-African International Conference on Combating Infectious Diseases is underway in Kampala, the capital of Uganda. The conference brings together leading experts from 16 countries, as well as from the African Centers for Disease Control and Prevention and the Regional Bureau of the World Health Organization for African countries.
It's the first of its kind, the first joint African-Russian International Conference on Combating Infectious Diseases. Conference participants are discussing the latest advances in the treatment and prevention of infectious diseases, modern threats and challenges to biological safety, as well as exchange experiences and develop joint strategies.
Infection disease, I think, is the cooperation type, partnership type for the Africa to combine a lot of disease. Like from Guinea, we have a lot of experience with Russian cooperation about the infection disease to help Guinean health public to combating the lot of disease in.
The Russian delegation is led by head of the Russian Federal Service for Surveillance and Consumer Rights Protection and Well-being, Anna Popova, who laments the non-existence of data on infectious diseases in many countries, adding that a number of factors are threatening global biological security.
Data on the infectious disease status of many countries is unreliable or non-existent. More than half of infections are not diagnosed. Monitoring and analyzing biological risks shows that threats to biological security are growing, and life proves this to be the case. The global epidemiological situation is unstable, with outbreaks of dangerous Ebola and Marburg virus intensifying and spreading to new territories, including in Africa.
Historically, there is significant risk to the country for public health threats with back-to-back disease outbreaks of zoonotic and vector-borne nature and other emergencies that impact on the socio-economical and livelihood of its population. This makes its health system to be continuously challenged by multiple public health emergencies. However, continuous efforts are taken to maintain and enhance the capacity needed to prepare and respond to all types of public health threats. And that is a great appreciation and an opportunity to Uganda in these areas.
I think in African country, in African countries, specifically in Niger, the challenges are firstly the imbalance of the national distribution. Secondly, you have the inadequacy of the laboratory system and their efficacy to prevent weaponization. And also the training you have to, this training is very important.
How can we combat these challenges?
Okay, to combat these challenges, to develop more cooperation, and to develop funded national, international, or regional to combat this challenge.
The Russian African International Conference on Combating Infectious Diseases began on Wednesday and will end on Friday, April 19th. 170 delegates from 16 countries, including Uganda, Burundi, Burkina Faso, Vietnam, Gabon, Guinea, Egypt, Zambia, Mozambique, Namibia, Niger, Congo, Ethiopia, are discussing the prevention and treatment of diseases and sharing experiences in countering dangerous outbreaks, new disease surveillance techniques, and scientific research.
Hundreds of Kenyan doctors and other medical practitioners continue their protest, demanding better pay and better working conditions in an ongoing nationwide strike that has entered its 5th week. The doctors carried placards and chanted against the Kenyan government, saying it had failed to implement a raft of promises, including a collective bargaining agreement signed in 2017 after a 100-day strike during which people died from lack of care. The strike has left many patients without access to essential medical services, exacerbating their conditions and causing distress.
We are here because the government of Kenya has gone for a strike. We are trying to compel them to come back to the negotiation table because they had been ordered by the courts to come back to the negotiation table and conclude the CBA, which they have refused. So they have gone on strike, and we are trying to tell them to come back to the table.
We give notice, and vuvuzelas and whistles are the only language we can use to speak on the streets. And we want our plight, our issues to be understood. Because when there are no doctors, when there are no healthcare workers in the hospitals, then the patients can't get care. We are Kenyans, and we are able to also be patient, actually, at one particular point. So we know when we speak of the issues of Kenyans, we are Kenyans. And therefore there is need that these taxes that we pay, part of it must be used to actually make healthcare.
So it is hypocrisy and dishonesty to tell us that there is no money and come and target our salaries. Yet nobody is talking about the scale of work we do. No one is saying that we are going to do less work. They want us to do the same work that people did last year with 70% less pay, which we shall not sit down and watch happen.
South Africa has now gone 21 consecutive days without power cuts. The first time such a streak has been achieved in nearly 2 years. This is according to the state-owned power company Eskom. In a statement on Wednesday, the company says the last time Eskom achieved a similar milestone was in June 2022, with 20 consecutive days without load shedding. The statement adds that Eskom would continue to suspend the power cuts, known locally as load shedding, until further notice. It attributes the stabilization of power supply to reduced demand for electricity, adequate emergency power reserves, and an improvement in its electricity generation capacity. However, some South Africans have voiced skepticism, speculating that the reduced power cuts could be a scheme by the ruling government to appease voters ahead of next month's crucial general election. And still to come on the program. Another Chibok female abducted as a student, rescued along with her 3 children. Please stay with us for details. Welcome back. Troops of the Nigerian army deployed in the northeast have announced the rescue of Lydia Simon, a Chibok girl who had been held captive by Boko Haram terrorists for several years. A statement from the Department of Army Public Relations says Lydia, who was on serial number 68 among the abducted missing Chibok secondary school girls, was rescued along with her 3 children by troops conducting Operation Desert Sanity 3 around Ngoshe in Gwaza local government area of Borno State. Lydia is 5 months pregnant at the time, or was 5 months pregnant at the time of her rescue, and claimed to be from Pemi town in Chibok. The statement adds that Nigerian army troops deployed for counter-terrorism, counter-insurgency operations in the North Central on Tuesday, April 16, 2024, successfully ambushed and neutralized 3 terrorists who were on a mission to cause havoc. Let's get more on this. Joining us now is Dr. Agbo Ebuta, a family physician, to discuss the well-being of these girls, now young women. He joins us from Abuja. A pleasure having you on the program today.
Pleasure having you too on an unfortunate note.
Yes, and for 10 years, these girls turned women, having been living in the surroundings that were forced on them. What problems might they have encountered or might they encounter now as women getting reintegrated into what should be their former familiar life that has moved on without them?
Well, indeed, the problems are quite a lot. But if you were to approach it from the health point of view, health is about physical, mental, and social well-being. So from the physical aspect, you have to check there will be issues with communicable and non-communicable diseases. For non-communicable diseases, things like hypertension and diabetes may not be a major concern because of the age range of these victims, but communicable conditions and infections and diseases like malaria, salmonella. Malaria will be parasites, things like malaria, amoeba, and all of that. These are the parasitic infections we expect. Other infections will be helminths like worm infestations, like ascaris and the rest. We would also expect them to have bacterial infections that cause typhoid and salmonella because these people have been living in the bush, so to speak, in some forest with very harsh conditions. So these are just a nutshell the physical health issues. But there's also a big issue, which is the mental health issues. The mental health issues are quite a lot. They would have issues like post-traumatic stress disorders, things like anxiety, and also some attachment to their whole environment. Some of these victims have been there for years, like the patient, the index patient you mentioned has even had 3 kids. So she has a family within the captive, within the environment where she was kidnapped and taken to. So she has some bonding with these terrorists or these insurgents, so to speak. So she has a family with them. That is a problem for her because it's going to have implications for her mental health because you have, in as much as we have saved her from her problems, you are also taking her from an environment where she has somehow grown used to over time, formed bonds with, giving birth to children whose fathers are involved in some form of insurgency or the other. The third domain we need to look at is the domain of the social interaction. So the social dislocation this woman or these patients or these kidnapped victims are going to be exposed to is significant. They have been spending a significant number of time in the bush, moving from one place to the other. They have not been exposed to any form of education. They've also not been exposed to any form of interaction that is outside a harsh security environment, like they have been exposed, like they've been experiencing. So that movement from this environment to a new environment, in as much as it is a rescue, is a significant dislocation. So we need to address the 3 domains, which will be the physical health of this patient, the mental health of this patient, and the social distortion, the social dislocation that these victims are experiencing. And it's a big issue, really.
Right, and if we can talk about the social distortion, I know that there was a time, when we hear things like the Stockholm Syndrome that you just described, where the captives usually, find a way to run back to where they were rescued. Do you think, something like this may take place in the case of these girls?
Well, it is a possibility. In as much as orthodox medicine has not fully defined, classified, and adopted Stockholm Syndrome as an entity, so to speak. But this is being discussed critically. A lot of people have come up with theories on why this happens. Imagine you find yourself as a captive and your captor is providing you food and some form of protection, and now you have children for this captor, you would have some relationship, you would have some, you would basically have some emotional attachment. So once you are moved from that environment, there is a chance that you may have some ties with this person, and this may be described as the Stockholm Syndrome that is easily remembered by the 1970s experience in Sweden, where the victims of an armed robbery, after spending a lot of times with the armed robbers, upon being released, were advocating for these armed robbers, even raised money for these armed robbers, and were trying to protect the interest of the armed robbers against the state. They even were in a counter position to the sitting prime minister then. So yes, in fact, I think in unofficial quarters, we have heard that some of these ladies who were released actually requested that they want, one or two may have requested that they want to go back to their husbands who are still maybe insurgents or terrorists, non-state actors. So it is important to understand and to treat each case in its merit. You need to evaluate each patient in its you need to evaluate each patient individually and come up with an intervention that is precise to what this patient needs. These patients need physical intervention to address infections and all those conditions. They also need long-term mental health conditioning intervention, psychotherapy, and follow-up, because they are also at risk, apart from Stockholm Syndrome, they are also at risk of post-traumatic stress disorder. If you are in a place where you are exposed to life-threatening situations, by the time you are moved from that place to a new place that is safe, you still have flashbacks, you still have avoidance behavior, you still have panic disorders, panic attacks, and anxiety. So these are conditions. And depression. Depression also has been shown to be very high in patients who were kidnapped victims even after rescue. So we need to understand that long-term psychotherapy must be part of all reintegration programs. Of course, other components like reintegration into the society, because some of them are exposed to stigmatization to a large extent, where people who were not kidnapped in the community see them as outcasts. These are people who are coming from the camp. They've been with insurgents, Boko Haram or whoever for 10 years. So you are now part of those people. You are not part of us. So we need to come up with a very comprehensive program. The government is doing an excellent job, but we need to come up with a template that is communicated to every health framework, every stakeholder, so that what you have is a framework that is plug and play. If you have a kidnapped victim, these are the things you need to do. I don't know if we'll have a policy document yet on it, but we need to develop one. And if we've already developed one, we need to review it, update it in keeping with the times and the evidence-based facts that we have, and we publicize and distribute this to as many people as we can, so that as numbers of people who are rescued from the hands of kidnappers and insurgents are brought back to the community, we can offer them adequate physical intervention, adequate and optimal mental intervention, and of course do social integration for them, which will allow them to get back to work, go back to normal life, get back to school, acquire skills that will make them independent, and then also program them in such a way that they see themselves as saved and actually separated from their past, which although will keep coming back, therefore the need for long-term follow-up.
Right. Family physician Dr. Euta, thank you for sharing your thoughts with us on that situation on the program.
No, you're welcome. Thank you.
Well, Nigerian chess master Tunde Onakoya is currently playing in New York City, attempting to break the Guinness World Record for the longest chess marathon for 58 hours without losing one game. Mr. Onakoya, who began on Wednesday, has played for over 20 hours now in the heart of Times Square. He says he's doing this for the dreams of millions of children across Africa who do not have access to education. He's trying to raise $1 million to support a global chess education for African children initiative. His endeavor is trying to surpass the existing Guinness World Record set by Halvard Haug Flatbow and Euta of Norway in 2018, who enjoyed an impressive 56 hours, 9 minutes, and 37 seconds of play. That's it on the program today. Thank you for watching. I'm Jackie Rogers.